A swing moved gently in the breeze, its chains creaking faintly under the weight of absence. Jessica Monroe's voice echoed through Riverside Park. "Avery, Avery," but no answer came. What began as an ordinary Thursday would soon unravel into every parent's worst nightmare. At a Washington park, a 4-year-old toddler vanished without a trace. Her mother had stepped away briefly to grab a fresh diaper bag from her car when a friendly woman offered to watch the child. But when she returned just minutes later, both the woman and her daughter had disappeared. Police investigations initially yielded nothing. But 48 hours later, a park janitor at Riverside Park made a shocking discovery inside the nearby restroom at Riverside Park. Evidence that left everyone involved fearing the worst. Jessica Monroe sat motionless in the hard plastic chair of the Jacksonville Police Department central waiting room, her gaze fixed on the scuffed tile floor beneath her feet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting an unforgiving glare that emphasized the dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept more than a handful of hours in the past 48 hours, not since her 4-year-old daughter, Avery, had vanished from Riverside Park. Her trembling hands clutched a slightly worn photograph of Avery. The picture had been taken earlier that day at the park's playground. Avery's smile was wide, her eyes crinkled with laughter. In the photo, she wore her favorite red Elmo t-shirt, the same shirt she had on when she disappeared. Jessica glanced at the wall clock, 4:37 p.m. She had just finished her second exhaustive interview with Detective Hart, a methodical, stone-faced man with kind eyes that betrayed his professional demeanor. For 2 hours, they had once again dissected every excruciating minute of that afternoon at Riverside Park. "Ms. Monroe," the desk officer called out, startling her. "Detective Hart says it'll be about 20 more minutes before the forensics team calls in with their update." Jessica nodded, her throat too tight to form words. She returned to staring at the floor, replaying the events for the 1,000th time in her mind. It had been a perfectly ordinary Thursday afternoon. She had taken Avery to Riverside Park after picking her up from daycare. The spring weather was mild, and Avery had been excited about going on the swings, her favorite. Jessica remembered how Avery had squealed with delight as they approached the playground, her tiny hand tugging insistently at Jessica's. Everything changed so quickly. Avery had a sudden bout of diarrhea, soiling her pull-up diaper badly. Jessica realized she'd left the diaper bag in her car, parked about 200 feet away in the lot. She tried to coax Avery to come with her, but the toddler had firmly planted herself on the swing, lower lip jutting out stubbornly as she began to throw one of her typical tantrums. "No, go swing more," Avery had protested, her small face scrunching up with determination. That's when the woman on the park bench had spoken up. "I can watch her for a minute if you need to grab something," she'd offered with a warm smile. "I'm Lindsay. I'm a kindergarten teacher. My son is over there on the monkey bars." Jessica had hesitated, looking between the friendly woman and her screaming daughter. It would only take 5 minutes tops. "Are you sure you don't mind?" Jessica had asked. "Not at all," Lindsay replied, already moving to sit beside Avery on the adjacent swing. "We teachers are used to diaper emergencies. Take your time. 5 minutes. That's all it had taken for her world to collapse. When Jessica returned with the diaper bag, both Avery and the woman were gone. She'd immediately scanned the playground, her heart rate accelerating with each passing second. She called out Avery's name, drawing curious and then concerned looks from other parents. Perhaps they'd gone to the bathroom? Jessica had rushed to the park's restroom at Riverside Parks, pushing open the heavy door with mounting panic. The women's restroom at Riverside Park had been empty, each stall door ajar. No sign of Avery or Lindsay. She checked the men's room too, calling Avery's name with increasing desperation. Nothing. That's when she'd called 911, her voice breaking as she reported her missing child. Park security had been alerted immediately, and within 20 minutes, Police officers had swarmed Riverside Park, questioning witnesses and forming search parties. They had called Eric immediately, her ex-husband of 6 months. Despite their bitter divorce, he deserved to know that his daughter was missing. His reaction had been exactly what she expected. Explosive anger directed primarily at her. "You let a stranger watch our daughter," he had shouted over the phone. "What the hell is wrong with you, Jessica? Can't you just be a good mother?" The police had searched Eric's house that evening as part of their standard procedure. They found nothing suspicious, and Eric had provided a solid alibi for his whereabouts that afternoon. The sound of the station's front door opening pulled Jessica from her dark thoughts. She looked up to see Eric Langford walk in, his face already flushed with familiar anger. His normally well-kept appearance was disheveled. His button-down shirt was wrinkled, and his hair stuck up as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Detective Hart had called him in too to wait for the surveillance update and review his statement once more. When Eric's eyes landed on Jessica, his expression hardened further. "This is your fault," he spat, not bothering with a greeting. "If anything happens to my daughter because of your negligence, I swear to God, Jessica, you'll never see her again, not if I have anything to say about it." Jessica felt a surge of anger cut through her grief. "Don't you dare threaten me, Eric." "Not now. Threatening? I'm stating facts. You left our daughter with a complete stranger." "I was gone for 5 minutes to get her diaper bag," Jessica shot back, her voice rising. "And where were you?" "Oh, right. You were too busy with your important meeting to take Avery for the day like you were supposed to before you cancelled last minute. Don't turn this around on me. And speaking of diarrhea, it was probably that cheap daycare food you feed her. It wasn't the daycare food. It was that fruit pouch you sent over yesterday morning," Jessica countered. She was fine until she ate that. In the afternoon after the daycare, Eric's face flushed deeper red. "That's ridiculous. I bought her favorite snack from the store. There was nothing wrong with it." He took a step toward Jessica, his hands baldled into fists at his sides. Officer Diaz, who had been stationed at the front desk, quickly moved between them. "That's enough." Detective Hart's authoritative voice cut through the tension as he emerged from his office. "Both of you need to calm down. This isn't helping us find Avery." Eric took a deep breath, visibly trying to compose himself. "Fine. What's the latest? Have you found anything from the surveillance footage?" "We're still waiting on some results," Detective Hart replied. "Mr. Langford, I'd like to go over a few more details with you while we wait." "Make it quick," Eric said, checking his watch. "I have a meeting in an hour that I can't miss." Jessica stared at him incredulously. Their daughter was missing and he was worried about a meeting. Before Detective Hart could respond, the desk phone rang. Officer Diaz answered it, his expression changing rapidly as he listened to the caller. Whatever news he was receiving, it wasn't good. The officer quickly put the caller on hold and approached Detective Hart, speaking in a hushed voice. Jessica stood up, her heart hammering against her ribs. Something had happened. Detective Hart's face grew grim as he listened. He nodded once, then turned to Jessica and Eric. "We've just received a call from a janitor at Riverside Park," he said, his voice steady and controlled. "He found something in the women's restroom at Riverside Park you should know about." Jessica's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Did they? She couldn't finish the question. "No, not Avery," Detective Hart quickly clarified. "But the janitor found a child-sized shirt and a soiled diaper inside a locked stall in the women's restroom at Riverside Park. The shirt matches the description of what Avery was wearing when she disappeared. A red Elmo shirt size 2T. Avery had been wearing it for 2 days straight because she refused to take it off." "I need to go there," Jessica said, already reaching for her purse. "I need to see it. We will head over." Detective Hart replied, "You can come with us, but I need to prepare you." "I've received photos from the field team at the park," Detective Hart announced, holding up his phone. "Ms. Monroe, would you like to verify if these items belong to Avery?" Jessica nodded, standing on unsteady legs. Detective Hart showed her the screen. The image showed a small red T-shirt, with Elmo's face prominently displayed on the front, laid out next to a soiled diaper. Both items were on the tile floor of what was clearly a public restroom at Riverside Park. That's her shirt, Jessica confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. She was wearing it yesterday. She loves Elmo. A sob caught in her throat. I need to go there. I need to see it in person. Detective Hart nodded. We'll go now. The forensics team is already processing the scene. I can't go, Eric announced abruptly. I told you I have that meeting, but I want to be kept updated on everything. He pointed a finger at Detective Hart. You call me the second you know anything more. Without another word or even a glance at Jessica, Eric strode out of the station, leaving behind a wake of tension and the faint scent of expensive cologne. Jessica watched him go, a mixture of anger and disbelief coursing through her. How could he possibly prioritize a meeting over their missing daughter? But then again, that had always been Eric's way. Work first, family second. It was one of the many reasons their marriage had fallen apart. Ms. Monroe. Detective Hart's voice pulled her back to the present. Are you ready to go? Jessica nodded, squaring her shoulders and taking a deep breath. Yes. Let's go find my daughter. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Riverside Park as Detective Hart's unmarked police car pulled into the parking lot. The playground equipment stood eerily empty, cordoned off with yellow police tape that fluttered in the breeze. 2 police cruisers and a forensics van were already parked near the public restroom at Riverside Parks. Jessica felt a surreal sense of déjà vu as she stepped out of the car. Just 48 hours ago, she'd been here with Avery, watching her daughter laugh as she pushed her on the swings. Now the park felt like a crime scene because it was this way. Ms. Monroe, Detective Hart said, guiding her toward the restroom at Riverside Parks, where a small cluster of officers and forensics personnel had gathered. As they approached, Jessica could see evidence markers placed on the ground near the restroom at Riverside Park entrance. A tall, thin man in a grey maintenance uniform stood off to the side, speaking with a female officer. He kept removing his cap and running a hand through his salt and pepper hair, his expression troubled. That's Frankie Morales, the park janitor at Riverside Park, who found the items, Detective Hart explained quietly. He's worked here for over 15 years. Jessica nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She watched as a forensics technician exited the restroom at Riverside Park, carrying 2 clear evidence bags. In one was Avery's red Elmo shirt, and in the other the soiled diaper. Seeing the items up close made Jessica's heart clench painfully in her chest. Ms. Monroe, this is Officer Chen from our forensics team, Detective Hart said as the technician approached. She's been processing the evidence. Officer Chen, a petite woman with intelligent eyes and a gentle demeanor, nodded respectfully to Jessica. We've done our preliminary examination of the items, she explained. There's no apparent blood on either the shirt or diaper, which is a good sign. Jessica released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. What about, can you tell if someone hurt her? We won't know everything until we get these back to the lab, Officer Chen replied carefully, but there are no immediate signs of trauma based on what we found. The diaper appears to simply be soiled, consistent with your report of Avery having diarrhea. Detective Hart motioned to the janitor. Mr. Morales, could you please tell Ms. Monroe what you told me about finding these items? Frankie Morales approached, twisting his cap nervously in his hands. His weathered face was etched with concern. Ma'am, I'm so sorry about your little girl. I've got grandkids myself and I can't imagine. Thank you, Jessica said softly. Please just tell me what you found. Frankie nodded, gathering himself. I do my cleaning rounds 3 times a day here, morning, afternoon, and evening. This morning, when I went to clean the women's restroom at Riverside Park, I noticed the last stall was locked. I knocked, but no one answered, so I figured it was just stuck. Happens sometimes with these old locks. He gestured toward the restroom at Riverside Park. This afternoon, same thing. Stall still locked. No one inside. I meant to bring my tools to fix it, but got called to handle a spill on the other side of the park. But just now, during my evening round, I decided to check if it was still stuck. When it was, I used my master key to open it, and that's when I found he trailed off, glancing at the evidence bags. The shirt and diaper were just sitting there on the floor, Jessica asked, trying to understand. Yes, ma'am, right in front of the toilet. Looked like someone had just left them there. Detective Hart interjected. Mr. Morales immediately called 911, and our officers responded within minutes. Could my daughter have been in there? Could someone have been keeping her locked in that stall? Jessica asked, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. Officer Chen shook her head. It's unlikely, Ms. Monroe. We've dusted the entire stall for fingerprints, and while we found partial prints on the lock mechanism, we found no child-sized prints anywhere in the stall, not on the walls, the toilet, or the floor where a child would likely have touched. What does that mean? Jessica asked, looking between the officer and detective. It suggests that Avery wasn't physically in the restroom at Riverside Park, Detective Hart explained gently. Based on the position of the items and the lack of child fingerprints, it appears someone placed these items there deliberately. But why? Why would someone take my daughter's clothes and soiled overnight diaper, then leave them in a bathroom stall? Detective Hart's expression was grim. It could be to mislead us, to distract our investigation, or send us in the wrong direction. Jessica felt her knees weaken as the implication hit her. This wasn't a case of Avery wandering off or getting briefly lost. Someone had intentionally taken her daughter and was now playing a calculated game with the evidence. What about the dirt on the clothes? The janitor asked, noticing smudges on the shirt through the clear evidence bag. Avery's clothes were already dirty from playing in the playground that day, Jessica answered. Officer Chen nodded. We'll analyze all the soil and stains in the lab. That might tell us if the shirt has been somewhere else since Avery was wearing it. As they spoke, another forensics technician emerged from the restroom at Riverside Park, carrying a small evidence envelope. Detective, the technician called. We found a partial fingerprint on the stall door that doesn't match the janitor's or any of the prints we've collected from the park staff. Detective Hart's posture straightened. With interest. Good work. Get that back to the lab immediately for analysis. Priority 1. He turned back to Jessica. We're going to continue processing this scene thoroughly, but I'd like to head back to the station now. We should be receiving updates on the park surveillance footage, and I want to review that with you as soon as possible. Jessica nodded, taking one last look at her daughter's shirt in the evidence bag. It seemed impossibly small and vulnerable, just like Avery. As they walked back toward the detective's car, Hart cleared his throat. There's one more thing, Ms. Monroe. We need Avery's medical records and birth certificate for our database. It helps us with verification and in alerting hospitals in surrounding areas. Jessica stopped walking. They're at Eric's house. Your ex-husband has them. Yes, I dropped them off at his place a few months ago during a custody handover. He was supposed to make copies and return the originals to me, but despite my reminders, he never did. Jessica sighed with frustration. I know exactly where they are. In the bottom drawer of the hallway cabinet just past his front door. Detective Hart frowned slightly. We can send an officer to pick them up. No, it's okay, Jessica said, surprising herself with the offer. I can get them. Eric's place isn't far. I'm not sure that's a good idea, Ms. Monroe, Detective Hart said, cautiously, given the tension between you two earlier. I'll be fast and careful, Jessica promised. I won't get into any confrontation with him. Detective Hart studied her for a long moment, then reluctantly nodded. All right, but please just get the documents and return to the station immediately, and call me if there's any problem at all. "I will," Jessica assured him, already calculating how quickly she could retrieve the documents and return. Every minute counted in finding Avery, and she wasn't going to waste a single one. As they got back into the detective's car, Jessica stared. Out at Riverside Park, a place that had once been filled with her daughter's laughter, but was now the starting point of a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Back at the police station, Jessica stood behind Detective Hart and a tech specialist as they reviewed the surveillance footage from Riverside Park. The monitor displayed a grainy black and white view of the parking lot near the playground. Detective Hart had explained that while the park's security system was outdated, they had managed to retrieve footage from the day Avery disappeared. "There," Jessica said, pointing at the screen. The timestamp read 3:42 p.m., approximately the time Avery had vanished. A woman carrying a girl in a red shirt was hurrying toward a sedan parked near the edge of the frame. A young boy, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, followed closely behind. "That's her. That's Lindsay." Detective Hart leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Can you zoom in on the vehicle?" The tech specialist adjusted the footage, zooming in on the sedan as it pulled away from the parking spot. "The angle's bad," he said, "but we can make out part of the license plate." Jessica could see only half of the plate number before the car moved out of the camera's view. "Run that partial through the DMV database," Detective Hart instructed. "Cross reference with sedan models matching this description." "Already on it," the specialist replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "It'll take some time to narrow down the results, but we should be able to get a list of possible matches." Jessica wrapped her arms around herself, fighting a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Seeing the woman, Lindsay, carrying her daughter away made everything terrifyingly real. "She seemed so normal," Jessica whispered, "so helpful. She said she was a kindergarten teacher." Detective Hart's expression remained professionally neutral, but his eyes softened with sympathy. Child abductors often present themselves as trustworthy. They know exactly what to say to gain a parent's confidence. The tech specialist turned from his computer. "Detective, I've sent the partial plate information to the officers. They'll begin running it through the system. With the make and model, we should be able to narrow it down significantly." "Good." Hart nodded. "Issue an emergency B with the vehicle description and send the woman's image from the footage to all patrol units." He turned to Jessica. "While we're waiting for those results, it might be a good time for you to get those documents from your ex-husband's house." Jessica nodded, gathering her purse. "I'll be as quick as I can." "Do you need an officer to accompany you?" Hart asked. "No, I'll be fine," Jessica insisted. "Eric should still be at his meeting, and I know exactly where the documents are. I'll just grab them and come straight back." Before leaving, Jessica signed several release forms that would allow the police to access Avery's medical information if needed. The bureaucratic process felt surreal, signing papers while her daughter was missing, but she understood the necessity. As she was about to leave, Detective Hart approached with a stern expression. "Ms. Monroe, I know this is difficult, but I need to remind you. If you do encounter your ex-husband, do not engage in any confrontation. Just get the documents and return here immediately." "I understand," Jessica said. She walked out to the parking lot where her car had been sitting since yesterday. The late afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the asphalt. As she slid into the driver's seat, she tried Eric's number one more time. The call went straight to voicemail. "Eric, it's me. The police need Avery's medical records and birth certificate. I'm coming by to pick them up from your place. Call me back if you get this." She ended the call and started the engine, her mind racing. The police were tracking down Lindsay, the woman who had taken Avery. Perhaps by the time she returned with the documents, they would have located her address. The thought gave Jessica a surge of hope as she pulled out of the police station. Parking lot. The drive to Eric's house would take about 15 minutes. 15 minutes closer to finding Avery. Jessica told herself she had to believe that. As she drove, Jessica's thoughts drifted back to the surveillance footage. Something about Lindsay had seemed so genuine, so trustworthy. How could she have been so wrong about someone? And why would a woman with her own child kidnap someone else's? None of it made sense, but then nothing had made sense since the moment she'd returned to the playground to find Avery gone. Jessica turned onto the familiar street where Eric had bought a house after their divorce. A modern two-story in a quiet neighborhood that was nothing like the cozy craftsman they had shared during their marriage. As she approached his address, she rehearsed exactly what she would do. Find the spare key, retrieve the documents from the hallway cabinet and leave. Simple, fast, no complications. Jessica pulled into Eric's driveway, immediately noticing his silver Audi parked there. Her heart sank. Despite his mention of a meeting, his car was still home. She briefly considered calling Detective Hart, but decided against it. She'd come this far, and the documents were too important to delay retrieving. She parked behind his car and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. Through the Audi's rear window, she could see several grocery bags in the back seat. Curious, she stepped out of her car and peered inside. The bags appeared full of supplies, though she couldn't make out specific items. Next to the bag sat Eric's personal suitcase, the expensive leather one he'd bought during their last anniversary trip, and a blue cooler box. Why would he have packed bags in his car? Jessica murmured to herself, a sense of unease growing in her stomach. She tried the car door, but it was locked. Stepping back, she pulled out her phone and dialed Eric's number again. This time, after several rings, he answered. "What do you want, Jessica?" His voice was impatient. "I'm at your house. The police need Avery's medical records and birth certificate for their database. Remember the ones in your hallway cabinet that you never returned to me?" There was a pause. "You shouldn't be at my house." "I wouldn't be if you'd returned her documents like I asked you to a dozen times," Jessica replied, struggling to keep her tone even. "The police need them now, Eric. This is important." Another long pause followed, then a heavy sigh. "Fine. There's a spare key under the stepping stone near the potted plants in the front yard." "Thank you," Jessica said, surprised by his sudden cooperation. "I'll just grab the documents and go." "See that you do," Eric replied coldly. "I don't appreciate you showing up at my house unannounced and going through my things." "I'm not," Jessica began, but Eric had already hung up. She pocketed her phone and walked to the front yard, scanning the stepping stones until she found one that wobbled slightly. Lifting it, she discovered a small magnetic key box hidden underneath. She removed the key and approached the front door, her heart racing despite her attempts to stay calm. The house was silent as she entered. The hallway was immaculate, so different from their family home that had always been cluttered with Averys. Toys and the happy chaos of family life. This place felt sterile, impersonal, despite the 6 months Eric had lived here. Jessica went directly to the hallway cabinet, opening the bottom drawer. She found exactly what she was looking for, a manila, envelope labeled Avery Important Documents, in her own handwriting. She pulled it out and quickly verified the contents. Avery's birth certificate, medical records, social security card, and immunization history. Everything the police might need was there. With the envelope in hand, Jessica should have left immediately. That had been her promise to Detective Hart. But something felt off about the packed car, the suitcase, the cooler. Why would Eric have those items ready if he was just going to a meeting? Against her better judgment, she found herself walking through the house, scanning for any sign that might indicate where Avery could be. The living room was sparsely furnished with a leather couch and a large television. The kitchen was spotless. No dishes in the sink, no sign of recent cooking. It looked like a model home rather than a place someone actually lived. As she passed the master bedroom, she noticed the door was ajar. A sliver of her conscience warned her to turn around and leave, but a stronger instinct, a mother's instinct, pushed her forward. The bedroom was as meticulously kept as the rest of the house, the king-sized bed, perfectly made with crisp navy sheets. But what caught Jessica's eye was on the dresser. A gift wrapped in blue paper decorated with colorful cars and ships, the kind of wrapping paper you'd use for a young boy's present. Beside it sat a woman's hair clip, tortoiseshell and delicate. Definitely not something that belonged to Eric. Jessica froze, staring at these items that seemed so out of place in her ex-husband's sterile bedroom. Who was the gift for? And whose hair clip was that? A chill ran down her spine at the thought of Eric possibly having a girlfriend or someone helping him. He had never mentioned anyone, not to the police when they questioned him yesterday, not to mutual friends, not even to family. Jessica took out her phone and snapped photos of both the wrapped gift and the hair clip. Then, careful not to touch the clip directly, she went to the kitchen and found a clean dish towel. Using it to pick up the hair clip, she placed it in a Ziploc sandwich bag she found in a drawer. Might be useful, she whispered to herself, sealing the bag. Her heart hammered in her chest as she turned off the lights, closed the doors she had opened, and made her way back to the front entrance. She locked the door behind her and returned the spare key to its hiding place, trying to leave everything exactly as she had found it. Back in her car, Jessica took a deep breath, clutching the manila envelope and the sandwich bag containing the hair clip. She needed to get back to the police station immediately. Whatever connection Eric had to this. New woman, Detective Hart needed to know. She started her engine and began to back out of the driveway when her phone rang. It was Eric again. "Are you still at my house?" His voice was tight, controlled. "I'm just leaving," Jessica replied, trying to sound casual. "I got what I needed. I'm heading back to the station now." "Good. Don't come back here again without my permission." There was an edge to his voice that made her skin crawl. "I won't," she promised, ending the call. As she drove away from Eric's house, her mind was racing. The packed car, the suitcase, the gift for a boy, the woman's hair clip. None of it made sense individually, but together they painted a disturbing picture. She had driven only a few houses down when she noticed a taxi coming from the opposite direction. She didn't think much of it until she glanced in her rear-view mirror and saw the taxi's brake lights illuminate as it stopped in front of Eric's house. Jessica slowed her car and pulled over to a discreet spot, watching as a woman stepped out of the taxi. Even from a distance, she could make out the leather jacket, a hijab covering her hair, and large sunglasses that hid most of her face. "Hadi, is that?" Jessica whispered, pulling over to the curb several houses down. From her vantage point, she watched as the taxi driver opened the trunk and removed a large, bulky box. He helped the woman carry it to the driveway, setting it down near Eric's Audi. The woman paid the driver, and the taxi pulled away. Jessica's curiosity overpowered her caution. She turned off her engine and sank lower in her seat, watching the mysterious woman through her side mirror. Eric had never mentioned any Muslim friends or family members. Who was this woman, and why was she at his house with a large package? The answer came a moment later when the woman reached into her purse, pulled out a key, and unlocked Eric's front door as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. Jessica remained perfectly still in her car, heart pounding as she watched the woman enter Eric's house. This wasn't just any visitor. This woman had her own key. The strangeness of the situation kept Jessica rooted to her spot, despite knowing she should be heading back to the police station with Avery's documents. "What is going on here?" she whispered to herself, adjusting her side mirror for a better view. The woman stayed inside the house for several minutes. Jessica used this time to quickly note down the taxi's license plate number before it disappeared around the corner. Something told her this information might be important. Just as Jessica was debating whether to call Detective Hart, the front door opened again. The woman emerged carrying a duffel bag that appeared fully packed along with the blue-wrapped gift Jessica had seen on Eric's dresser. The head coverings and large sunglasses still obscured most of her face, making it impossible for Jessica to identify her clearly in the dimming evening light. What happened next left Jessica speechless. The woman reached into her purse, pulled out a car key, presumably to Eric's Audi, and clicked the unlock button. The car's lights flashed in response. "She has his car key too," Jessica murmured incredulously. Her ex-husband had never mentioned having a new girlfriend, let alone one who had access to both his house and his precious Audi that he barely let Jessica drive during their marriage. The woman loaded the duffel bag and gift into the back seat of the car. Then she returned to the large box the taxi driver had helped her place in the driveway. Pulling what looked like a box cutter from her pocket, likely taken from the house, she methodically sliced through the packaging tape. Jessica squinted, trying to make out what was inside. As the woman opened the flaps, her breath caught when she realized what it was. A brand new baby car seat. With practice efficiency, the woman removed the car seat from its packaging and installed it in the back seat of Eric's car. The entire process took only a few minutes, suggesting she was familiar with the task. "A car seat?" Jessica whispered, confusion tightening into dread. Eric had never mentioned having another child. Could it be for the woman's son? As Jessica watched, a terrible thought took hold. What if this wasn't just about a new girlfriend? Lindsay had a boy who looked around 7. Was it possible her husband was involved with her? The suitcase in his car, the grocery bags, the cooler box, it all pointed to someone preparing for a trip, and now this woman was quietly installing a car seat in his vehicle. If Jessica's darkest suspicion was true, then this woman had to be Lindsay. Still, something didn't quite add up. She didn't look like the woman Jessica had sat with at the playground yesterday. Her appearance was different enough to raise doubt, but not enough to rule it out entirely. Jessica's fingers hovered over her phone, ready to call Detective Hart, but she hesitated. What if she was jumping to conclusions? What if this were all an innocent coincidence? Her doubt evaporated as she watched the woman climb into the driver's seat of Eric's Audi and start the engine. This wasn't just a visit. She was taking his car somewhere, and with a newly installed car seat. The Audi's headlights came on, illuminating the darkening street as the woman backed out of the driveway. Without thinking, Jessica started her own car. She couldn't let this woman drive away, not when every instinct told her this was connected to Avery. As the Audi pulled away from the curb, Jessica made her decision. She would follow at a safe distance, see where this mysterious woman was going. Only then would she call Detective Hart with concrete information rather than mere suspicions of her ex-husband's personal life. She waited until the Audi was half a block ahead before pulling away from the curb and following. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white with tension. The documents she'd come for lay forgotten on the passenger seat beside her, along with the bagged hair clip. The rational part of her brain argued that she should return to the police station as promised, but the stronger part, the mother, desperate to find her daughter, pushed her forward, following the taillights of Eric's car as it moved through the quiet residential streets. "Where are you going?" Jessica whispered, maintaining a careful distance. "And do you have anything to do with my daughter?" Jessica kept a careful distance behind Eric's Audi as it wound through the residential streets of Jacksonville. The mysterious woman was driving with purpose, clearly familiar with the route. As they reached a main road, the Audi turned east away from the town center and toward the outskirts. With one eye on the road and the other on the tail lights ahead, Jessica fumbled for her phone and dialed Detective Hart's number. He answered on the second ring. "Ms. Monroe, did you get the documents?" "Yes, I got them," Jessica replied, keeping her voice low despite being alone in her car. But something's happening. There's a woman at Eric's house. She has her own key to his place in his car. She just put a brand new car seat in his Audi, and now she's driving away with a packed duffel bag. There was a brief pause on the line. Are you following her? Detective Hart's voice had shifted to a sharper tone. Yes, Jessica admitted. I know you told me to come straight back, but Detective, she had a key to Eric's house, and there was a suitcase and cooler in his car earlier, like he was planning to go somewhere. She heard the detective exhale heavily. Minute, I understand your concern, but following someone could be dangerous. Are you in any immediate danger right now? Jessica checked her mirrors. The woman showed no sign of having noticed her. No, I don't think so. I'm keeping my distance. I have this feeling. When I was at Eric's house, I found a wrapped gift for a young boy and a woman's hair clip in his bedroom. I think I know it might sound like a stretch, but I can't shake the feeling there's some connection between Eric and the woman who took Avery. She has a boy. That's a serious allegation, Detective Hart said carefully. We need evidence before. Did you find anything from the license plate number? Jessica interrupted, her anxiety making her impatient. Actually, yes, Hart replied, his tone becoming more professional. We identified a vehicle registered to a Lindsay Crane that matches the partial plate and car model from the surveillance footage. Officers were dispatched to her address, but the house appears vacant. No one's there, and neighbors say they haven't seen her in a few days. Jessica's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Lindsay Crane. That's her full name. Yes, we've issued an emergency B for her and informed authorities in surrounding towns, gas stations and transportation hubs. As they spoke, Jessica noticed they were heading onto a familiar road, one that led away from town and into the more rural outskirts where properties were spread farther apart. Wait, she said, a memory surfacing. I know where we're going. Eric has an old friend who owns a vacation cottage out this way. We visited once, years ago during our marriage. Last I heard, the friend had moved overseas and was renting the property out. Do you remember the address? Detective Hart asked, his voice now urgent. Not exactly, but it's on Evergreen Lane. I think it's isolated. The only cottage at the end of a long driveway set back from the road. Ms. Monroe, Detective Hart's voice was serious. I have more information you need to know. The forensics team got a preliminary match on the partial fingerprint from the bathroom stall. It matches Lindsay Crane's prints from a background check she underwent for her teaching license. Jessica's breath caught. So she is the one who left Avery's clothes in the bathroom. It appears that way. She's now our primary suspect, and we're treating this as a confirmed abduction case. Jessica watched as the Audi slowed and turned onto a narrow, tree-lined lane. Detective, we're turning onto what I think is Evergreen Lane now. The cottage should be at the end. I'm sending units to your location immediately, Hart said. But Jessica, listen to me carefully. Do not approach this woman or the cottage. She's now a wanted suspect in a child abduction case. If your ex-husband is involved, the situation could be volatile. I understand, Jessica said, though her entire being asked to rush to the cottage and search for Avery. I'm going to try to reach your ex-husband and inform him about Lindsay Crane. Hart continued. In the meantime, stay on the line with me. Find a safe spot and wait for our officers, or better yet, come back to town. Jessica slowed her car as the Audi approached the end of the lane. Just as she remembered, a rustic cottage stood alone, partially obscured by tall pine trees. The nearest neighboring house was at least a 4-mile away. She pulled over onto a small dirt turnout, partially hidden by bushes about 100 yards from the cottage's driveway. From this vantage point, she could see the Audi parked in front of the cottage, its headlights now off. I'm parked safely, Jessica whispered into the phone. I can see Eric's car in front of the cottage. Good, stay where you are. Units are on their way. Your location is showing on our GPS. Jessica watched as the woman stepped out of the car, carrying only the cooler box from the back seat. She walked confidently to the front porch and unlocked the door. As she stepped onto the porch, illuminated by the porch light, she removed her leather jacket, sunglasses, and scarf covering over her head. Though Jessica couldn't make out her features clearly from this distance, the woman's silhouette and movements were familiar. The same confident posture of the woman who had offered to watch Avery at the park. Jessica saw movement at the cottage, a door. A young boy, perhaps 7 years old, rushed out onto the porch and threw his arms around Lindsay's waist. Jessica recognized him immediately as the same boy she'd seen playing on the monkey bars at the park. "It's her," Jessica whispered. "It's Lindsay. Her son is there too," she reported, her voice trembling. But it was what happened next that made Jessica's world stop. From inside the cottage came a familiar sound, a whining cry that Jessica would recognize anywhere. A moment later, a small figure appeared in the doorway, toddling out onto the porch. Avery, her daughter, was wearing different clothes than when Jessica had last seen her, but there was no mistaking the way she moved, the shape of her tiny body, the tousled dark hair. "Oh my God," Jessica gasped, tears instantly filling her eyes. "Detective Avery's there. I can see her. She's at the cottage." Lindsay quickly scooped Avery up with one arm and corralled her son with the other, ushering both children back inside. The cottage. The door closed behind them and the porch light went out a moment later. "Are you absolutely certain it's Avery?" Detective Hart demanded, his voice tense. "Yes," Jessica choked out, tears now streaming down her face. "I'd know my daughter anywhere. It's her, Detective. She's alive. She's in there." "Miss Monroe, I need you to stay calm and stay in your vehicle. Do not approach the cottage. Do you understand? The situation could be dangerous." Jessica wiped at her tears, trying to compose herself. "I understand. I'll stay here. Just hurry, please." As they spoke, Jessica noticed another set of headlights turning onto Evergreen Lane, a black sedan. She held her breath as it pulled up. To the cottage. The back door opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. Eric. He was carrying what looked like a brown document envelope and wearing the same clothes he'd had on at the police station earlier. He paid the taxi driver and the cab pulled away, leaving him standing in front of the cottage. Without hesitation, he walked to the front door and entered without knocking. "Detective?" Jessica said, her voice shaking with a mixture of shock and rage. "Eric just arrived in a taxi. He went inside the cottage. He has a key, too." There was a brief silence on the line. When Detective Hart spoke again, his voice was deadly serious. "Manette, this confirms our suspicion that your ex-husband may be involved in Avery's abduction. Our units are 15 minutes out. I need you to stay exactly where you are. The situation is now considered high risk." Jessica clutched the phone tightly, her eyes fixed on the cottage where her daughter was being held by her own father and a woman who had expertly gained Jessica's trust only to betray it in the most devastating way possible. "They're going to try to take her away, aren't they?" Jessica whispered, a terrible realization dawning on her. The car seat, the packed bags, the documents Eric was carrying. They're planning to leave with her. "We won't let that happen," Detective Hart promised. "Just stay on the line with me." Jessica sat frozen in her car, watching the cottage with an intensity that made her eyes burn. Less than 5 minutes had passed since Eric entered, but it felt like an eternity. The knowledge that her daughter was just 100 yards away, yet still out of reach, was almost unbearable. The cottage door suddenly opened. Jessica held her breath as Eric emerged, carrying Avery in his arms. The little girl looked drowsy, her head resting on her father's shoulder. Behind them came Lindsay, holding the cooler box in one hand while guiding her son with the other. She was also carrying what looked like a children's suitcase. "They're coming out," Jessica hissed into the phone. "All of them. They're leaving." "Can you still see Avery clearly?" Hart asked. "Yes. Eric's carrying her. She looks tired, sleepy. It's her usual bedtime, so that makes sense. She's alive," Jessica's voice broke on the last word. She watched as Eric settled Avery into the newly installed car seat, while Lindsay helped her son into the other side of the back seat. They moved with practiced efficiency, like a family that had done this routine 100 times before. "They're getting in the car," Jessica reported, her heart racing. "They're switching off the lights in the cottage. They're locking up. Detective, they're leaving right now." "Ms. Monroe, stay calm," Hart ordered. "Our units are almost there." "Do not, I repeat, do not follow them if they leave before our officers arrive." But as Jessica watched Eric slide into the driver's seat and start the engine, she knew she couldn't risk losing sight of them. What if they took some back road the police didn't know about? What if they disappeared with Avery before the officers could intercept them? "I'm sorry, Detective," Jessica said, her resolve hardening. "I can't let them get away. I'll keep my distance, but I have to follow them. I have to make sure Avery doesn't disappear again." Jessica Hart began, but she cut him off. "I'll keep the line open. You can track my phone. Just tell your officers to hurry." Before he could protest further, Jessica started her engine. She waited until Eric's Audi had pulled away from the cottage and started down the lane before she followed, keeping her headlights off until they reached the main road. "They're heading east on Evergreen Road," she reported, maintaining a careful distance behind the Audi. "Eric's driving fast, like he's in a hurry. I've updated our units," Hart replied, his tone resigned but professional. "They're redirecting to intercept. Jessica, I understand why you're doing this, but please be careful. If they spot you following them, the situation could escalate." "I know," Jessica said, her eyes fixed on the taillights ahead. "I'll stay back. I just need to know where they're taking her." For the next 10 minutes, Jessica followed Eric's car as it wound through increasingly unfamiliar roads. They were heading away from Jacksonville, taking routes that suggested Eric was avoiding the main highways. "We're approaching Fernandina Beach," Jessica said, recognizing the outskirts of the neighboring town. "Detective, I think they might be heading for the harbor." "The harbor?" Hart repeated. "Why would they wait? The Coup ferry to Nassau leaves from Fernandina Beach around this hour." Jessica's stomach dropped. "They're trying to leave the country, Canada. They're going to take Avery to Canada." "I'm alerting the Fernandina Beach Police and Border Patrol now," Hart said, his voice taking on new urgency. "The ferry terminal will be their bottleneck. They'll need to present documents there." Eric was carrying an envelope when he arrived. "At the cottage," Jessica remembered. "Could those be fake documents for crossing the border?" "It's possible," Hart admitted. "Stay on their tail, but maintain your distance. Our units are converging on the ferry terminal now." The Audi continued toward Fernandina Beach, eventually turning onto a road that led directly to the waterfront. As they approached the ferry terminal, Jessica could see the large vessel docked at the pier, the MV COO, which made daily runs between Fernandina Beach and Nassau, Bahamas. "They're pulling into the ferry terminal parking lot," Jessica reported, her heart hammering in her chest. "The ferry looks like it's still boarding." "Perfect," Hart replied. "Fernandina Beach PD and our units are in position. They won't make it onto that ferry. Jessica, I need you to stay back now. Pull over and let our officers handle this." Jessica obediently pulled her car to the side of the road about 100 yards from the terminal entrance. From this vantage point, she could see Eric park the Audi in the short-term lot. He quickly got out and opened the rear door to unbuckle Avery, while Lindsay did the same for her son. "They're heading for the terminal entrance," Jessica whispered. Though she knew Hart could probably hear the police radio chatter reporting the same information. What happened next unfolded with startling speed. As Eric and Lindsay approached the terminal doors, several police cruisers converged from different directions, lights flashing but sirens silent. Officers emerged with weapons drawn, forming a semicircle around the couple and children. "Police, freeze! Put your hands in the air!" The commands echoed across the parking lot, clear even from Jessica's position. Eric and Lindsay froze. Shock evident in their postures. Slowly, they raised their hands. Avery, startled by the sudden commotion, began to cry. Lindsay's son clutched his mother's leg, his small face crumbling in fear. "They've got them," Jessica breathed, already unbuckling her seatbelt. "Detective, they've got them. Stay in your car until an officer comes for you," Hart instructed. But Jessica was barely listening. She watched as officers approached Eric and Lindsay cautiously, securing their wrists with handcuffs, while other officers gently separated the children from the adults. Unable to wait any longer, Jessica flung open her car door and ran toward the scene, her entire focus on the small figure in a pink sweater being held by a female officer. "Avery!" she called, her voice breaking. "Avery!" The little girl's head snapped up at the sound of her mother's voice. "Mama!" she cried, struggling in the officer's arms, reaching toward Jessica. An unformed officer stepped into Jessica's path, but Detective Hart's voice crackled over the radio at his hip. "Let her through. That's the mother." The officer nodded and stepped aside, allowing Jessica to rush forward. The female officer gently set Avery down, and the toddler ran on unsteady legs toward her mother. Jessica dropped to her knees, engulfing her daughter in a fierce embrace. Avery's small arms wrapped around her neck, holding on with surprising strength. "Mama, cry," Avery said, patting Jessica's wet cheek with a chubby hand. "Yes, baby? Mama's crying because she's so happy to see you," Jessica choked out, pressing kisses to her daughter's hair, face, and hands, reassuring herself that Avery was real and solid and alive. As she held her daughter, Jessica looked up to see Eric and Lindsay being led toward separate police cars. Eric's eyes met hers briefly, a mixture of rage and defeat in his expression. He spat on the ground as he passed, his face contorted with anger. "You don't deserve her," he snarled. "She deserves a real family, a complete family." "Something I could give her that you couldn't. Move along," an officer ordered, guiding Eric firmly toward the waiting cruiser. Jessica turned away, focusing her attention back on Avery. Now that the initial shock of reunion was fading, she could see that her daughter looked tired. Her voice sounded hoarse, and she coughed several times as Jessica held her. A paramedic approached them, crouching down to Avery's level. "Hi there, sweetheart. My name's Sarah. Is it okay if I check to make sure you're feeling all right?" Avery clung tighter to Jessica, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "It's okay, baby," Jessica soothed. "Sarah just wants to help make sure you're not sick." The paramedic smiled reassuringly. "I'll be quick. I promise you can stay right in your mommy's arms." As the paramedic began a gentle examination, Jessica noticed Lindsay's son standing alone near a police car, tears streaming down his face as he watched his mother being driven away. The boy looked lost and terrified, clutching a small toy car in his trembling hand. "What about my mom?" he asked a nearby officer, his voice small and broken. "Where is she going? When can I go with her?" The officer knelt beside him, speaking in a gentle tone that Jessica couldn't quite hear. The boy's face crumpled further. "But I don't want to go with strangers," he cried. "I want my mom and Avery. Mom promised me a sister for a long time, and Avery is nice. We played together. I don't want to lose my sister too." Jessica's heart twisted at the boy's words. Despite everything Lindsay had done, her son was an innocent victim in all this, a child who'd been dragged into his mother's terrible choices. The paramedic finished her preliminary examination of Avery and straightened up. "She seems okay overall, but she's a bit dehydrated and has a slight fever. The cough and hoarse voice are probably from crying and stress. I'd recommend a full checkup at the hospital, but there's no immediate medical concern." "Thank you," Jessica said, holding Avery closer. Detective Hart approached, his expression a mixture of relief and professional detachment. "Ms. Monroe, I'm glad you've been reunited with your daughter. We'll need statements from both of you, but that can wait until tomorrow if needed." Jessica nodded. "What happens now?" "We are processing the scene and gathering evidence. A forensics team is already searching the vehicle. He gestured toward Eric's Audi, where technicians in gloves were carefully removing items and placing them in evidence bags. "We've found the suitcases, grocery bags, cooler, a wrapped gift, and the new car seat, just as you described." Jessica remembered. "The hair clip she'd taken from Eric's bedroom. I have something else, too." She reached into her pocket and produced the sandwich bag containing the clip. "I found this on Eric's dresser. I think it might belong to Lindsay." Hart accepted the bag, examining the clip through the plastic. "Good thinking. This could help establish their connection." He looked back at Jessica. "We've also recovered documents from the envelope your ex-husband was carrying. They appear to be falsified identification papers and travel documents for all four of them, made to present them as a family traveling together. There's also a false consent form signed with your name and a forged signature." Jessica's stomach churned. "So they planned to pretend I had consented to Avery leaving the country." "And it seems that way," Hart confirmed. "The documents are sophisticated forgeries. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was carefully planned." Jessica looked over at Lindsay's son, who now sat on the curb, a social worker attempting to comfort him without much success. The boy's small shoulders shook with sobs. "What will happen to him?" she asked quietly. "Child Protective Services will take temporary custody while they locate any family members who might be able to care for him," Hart explained. "If there are none, he'll be placed in emergency foster care." Jessica nodded, her eyes still on the distraught child. Despite everything his mother had done, she couldn't help but feel compassion for the boy who had just lost everything familiar in his world. An officer approached Detective Hart with an update, and Jessica turned her attention back to Avery, who had begun to doze against her shoulder, exhausted from the ordeal. She pressed a gentle kiss to her daughter's forehead, overwhelmed with gratitude to have her back in her arms. But as she held her daughter close, she couldn't shake the image of the little boy sitting alone on the curb, his world shattered by the actions of adults who should have protected him. The fluorescent lights of the Jacksonville Police Department. Central seemed harsher than Jessica remembered as she sat in the interview room, Avery asleep in her lap. The fever had finally broken after the nurse at the station treated her. After the commotion at the ferry terminal, they had been escorted back to the station, Jessica, Avery, and Lindsay's son, who had been placed in the temporary care of a CPS worker named Andrea. Detective Hart sat across from Jessica, a digital recorder placed on the table between them. Despite the late hour, the station hummed with activity as officers processed the evidence and prepared charges against Eric and Lindsay. "I know you're exhausted," Hart said, his voice gentle, "but I need to get your formal statement." Jessica nodded, absently stroking Avery's hair. "I understand." For the next 30 minutes, Jessica recounted everything that had happened since she arrived at Eric's house to retrieve the documents. Looking back, she concluded, "I should have called you immediately when I saw the woman at Eric's house, but part of me couldn't believe he would be involved in Avery's disappearance. Despite everything, he's her father." Detective Hart nodded thoughtfully. "People are capable of surprising actions when they believe they're justified." He glanced down at his notes. "In this case, your instincts were correct. If you hadn't followed them, they might have made it onto that ferry, and recovering Avery would have become much more complicated." A knock at the door interrupted them. Officer Chen entered, carrying a folder. "Detective, we have updates from the field teams." Hart gestured for her to continue. Officer Chen opened the folder and consulted her notes. "The team at Lindsay Crane's residence reports the house appears to have been vacant for at least 2 weeks. Mail was piled up and neighbors confirm they haven't seen her recently. We found her personal items in Eric Langford's car trunk, suggesting she'd been staying elsewhere." Jessica thought of the hair clip she'd found on Eric's dresser. "She was staying with Eric, wasn't she?" Hart nodded. "It appears so. The team searching his house found women's personal items in the bathroom trash bin." Officer Chen continued, At the cottage, we found a bedroom set up specifically for children. Toys, snacks, juice boxes and water bottles were scattered around. The room wasn't locked, but it was clearly where the children had been spending their time. They just left them there alone, Jessica asked, horrified at the thought of Avery being abandoned in a strange place. It seems Lindsay let her son to keep an eye on Avery, Hart explained. Based on our initial interviews with the boy, they were alone at the cottage for several hours today, while Lindsay and Eric finalized their departure plans. Jessica tightened her arms around Avery, who stirred slightly, but didn't wake. That cottage belonged to Eric's friend, a man named Greg. Something. I can't remember his last name. He moved overseas years ago. Eric did some handyman work there occasionally. That's consistent with what we found. Officer Chen confirmed. The property is registered to a Gregory Walsh, currently residing in Australia. The locks had been recently changed, and we found evidence suggesting your ex-husband had been using the property without the owner's knowledge. Detective Hart thanked Officer Chen, who left the room. He turned back to Jessica. We've been able to piece together their plan based on the evidence and preliminary questioning. He said, it appears Eric and Lindsay met in an online parenting forum about 6 months ago, around the time of your divorce. From what we've found in their message history, he convinced her to help him reunite a father and daughter in exchange for money, companionship, and the promise of being a perfect family. Jessica's stomach twisted, and she agreed to kidnap her child for him just like that. People's motivations can be complex, Hart said carefully. From what we can tell, Lindsay is a single mother who was struggling financially. Her son had apparently been asking for a sibling, and Eric offered her what seemed like a solution to multiple problems. So, they planned this together, Jessica said, the full weight of the betrayal settling on her shoulders. Eric knew my routine. With Avery, that I often left the diaper bag in the car during short trips to the park because I was potty training her and only used the pull-up diapers as a backup. Hart nodded. The morning of the abduction, Eric delivered what he called a care package to your door, correct? Yes, Jessica confirmed. There were toys and snacks, including those fruit pouches she loves. We believe he tampered with the fruit pouch to induce Avery's stomach upset, Hart explained. Our lab is still testing it, but the timing suggests it was deliberate. Once Avery had diarrhea, they knew you'd need to get her diaper bag, creating the opportunity for Lindsay to take her. And then they planted her clothes in the bathroom to throw off the investigation, Jessica concluded, anger building inside her while they prepared to leave the country with my daughter. Exactly. The paperwork we recovered shows they planned to take the ferry to Nassau and then fly from Canada to Bice, where Eric had rented a remote property under an alias. By the time we tracked them internationally, they would have been established with new identities in a country with complicated extradition procedures. Jessica shook her head, trying to process the methodical cruelty of the plan. But why? Why would Eric do this? Hart's expression was grave. Based on our initial interview with him, he was deeply resentful about the custody arrangement. He blamed you for turning Avery against him and believed he deserved full custody. The court denied him unsupervised visitation because he was emotionally abusive, Jessica said quietly. He would manipulate her, make her cry, and then blame me for poisoning her against him. The judge saw through it. People like your ex-husband rarely accept responsibility for their actions, Hart observed. In his mind, taking Avery was justified. He was rescuing her from you. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Andrea, the CPS worker, peered in. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know. The boy is asking for Avery. He's quite upset and keeps saying she's his sister now. Jessica glanced down at her sleeping daughter, then back at Andrea. What's going to happen to him? We're trying to locate any family members who might be able to take him, Andrea explained. His name is Caleb. He's 7. So far, We haven't found any relatives willing or able to take custody. His father isn't in the picture, and his maternal grandparents are both deceased." "So, he'll go into foster care?" Jessica asked. Andrea nodded soberly. "Most likely, yes. Emergency placement first, then a more permanent arrangement if no family comes forward." Jessica felt a deep ache in her chest for the little boy who had lost everything in one terrible night. He was as much a victim in this as Avery was. An innocent child caught in the web of adult deception. Could I talk to him?" Jessica asked, surprising herself. Detective Hart and Andrea exchanged glances. "I don't see why not," Andrea said carefully. "It might actually help him to see that Avery is okay." Jessica gently shifted Avery in her arms and stood. "I'd like to see him then." They walked to a small break room that had been converted into a temporary waiting area for Caleb. The boy sat at a table with a half-eaten sandwich and an untouched apple in front of him. His eyes were red-rimmed from crying, and he clutched the same toy car Jessica had seen him holding at the ferry terminal. When the door opened, Caleb looked up hopefully, but his expression fell when he saw Andrea return with strangers. "Caleb," Andrea said gently, "this is Ms. Monroe. She's Avery's mom." Caleb's eyes widened, his gaze fixing on the sleeping toddler in Jessica's arms. "Is Avery okay?" he asked in a small voice. "She's okay," Jessica assured him, taking a seat. Across from him, "She's just very tired," Caleb nodded solemnly. "I tried to take care of her like Mom said. I gave her juice when she was thirsty and helped her when she needed the bathroom." Jessica felt a lump form in her throat. "That was very kind of you, Caleb. You were a good friend to Avery." "Mom said we were going to be a family," Caleb said, his lower lip trembling. "She said Avery would be my sister, and we would live in a new place with a beach, and that Eric would be my new dad." He looked up at Jessica, confusion and hurt in his eyes. "But the police took Mom away. Did she do something bad?" Jessica exchanged a glance with Andrea, who nodded encouragingly. "Caleb," Jessica began carefully, "your mom made some mistakes. She took Avery without asking me, and that's not allowed." "But Eric said it was okay," Caleb protested. "Eric isn't allowed to make that decision by himself," Jessica explained. "Avery needs to live with me, just like you need to live with your mom. But right now, your mom needs to talk to the police about the mistakes she made." Caleb's small shoulders slumped. "So where do I go now?" Andrea said. "I can't go home." The boy's desolation tore at Jessica's heart. In that moment, a certainty formed within her, a decision that felt right, despite its suddenness. "Detective," Jessica said, turning to Hart, who stood quietly by the door, "would it be possible for Caleb to stay with me temporarily, at least until a more permanent arrangement is made?" Hart raised his eyebrows in surprise. "That's not typically how these situations are handled, Ms. Monroe. There are procedures for emergency foster placement." "I understand," Jessica said, "but Caleb has been through so much. He's formed a bond with Avery, separating them now, sending him to strangers. It seems cruel." "It's not that simple," Andrea interjected gently. "There are background checks, home inspections, approvals needed." "Oh, but those things can be expedited, can't they?" Jessica pressed. "I have a stable job, a safe home. I've been vetted during the custody proceedings with Eric. All those records should be available." Hart and Andrea exchanged another look, a silent communication passing between them. "It might be possible," Andrea conceded. "If Lindsay were to consent to a temporary guardianship arrangement, it could speed things up considerably." "Could I speak with her?" Jessica asked. Hart hesitated. "She's currently being processed and interviewed, but I suppose a brief conversation could be arranged if she's willing." An hour later, Jessica found herself sitting across from Lindsay Crane in a small, sterile interview room. The woman, who had seemed so trustworthy and maternal at the park, now looked diminished, her eyes red from crying, her hands fidgeting nervously on the table. "Why did you want to see me?" Lindsay asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jessica took a deep breath. "I wanted to ask about Caleb." At the mention of her son's name, Lindsay's composure cracked. "Is he okay?" "They won't tell me where they've taken him." "He's scared and confused," Jessica replied honestly. "He misses you." Tears spilled down Lindsay's cheeks. "I never meant for him to get hurt." I thought she broke off, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter what I thought. I've ruined everything. Caleb told me you promised him a sister. Jessica said that you and Eric were going to be a perfect family." Lindsay nodded miserably. "Eric found me on a single parents forum. He seemed so charming, so understanding about the struggles of raising a child alone. When he told me about how you were keeping his daughter from him, how all he wanted was to give her a complete family." She trailed off, shame evident in her downcast eyes. "You believed him," Jessica finished for her. "I wanted to believe him," Lindsay corrected. "Caleb has been asking for a sibling since he was 3. His father left before he was born, and I've been trying to give him everything, on my own. When Eric offered me a chance at a ready-made family, financial security, a fresh start," she shook her head again. "I know it doesn't excuse what I did. I've committed a terrible crime, and I'll pay for it." Jessica studied the woman across from her for a moment. "When I saw you at Eric's house today, you were wearing a covering and sunglasses. Why the disguise?" Lindsay's face flushed with shame. "I'm not Muslim. That was Eric's idea. He was paranoid about someone recognizing me if I went to his house. He bought me the head covering and told me never to show my face in his neighborhood, only to take it off once I reached the cottage. And Eric's car was at his house when he claimed to be at a meeting." Jessica continued, "Was that part of the plan too?" Lindsay nodded. "The meeting was with the people who forged our documents. They picked him up in their car. Eric said they insisted on it, so he wouldn't know where their operation was based." She looked up at Jessica, her eyes haunted. "But you still chose to take my daughter," Jessica said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Yes," Lindsay whispered, "I did, and I'll never forgive myself for that." Jessica took a deep breath. "I came here to ask your permission for something." Lindsay looked up, confusion in her tear-stained face. "I'd like to take Caleb in while you deal with the legal consequences of what's happened," Jessica said. "Not permanently, but as a temporary guardian, until a more permanent arrangement can be made." Lindsay's eyes widened in shock. "You want to take care of my son after what I did to you, to your daughter. Your mistake shouldn't ruin Caleb's life," Jessica said firmly. "He's innocent in all this. He cares about Avery, and tearing them apart now would only cause more trauma for both children." Lindsay stared at Jessica, bewilderment giving way to something like hope. "You would do that for him? For us?" "I would do it for Caleb," Jessica clarified. "And yes, indirectly for you too. Every child deserves to be loved and cared for regardless of their parents' mistakes." Tears flowed freely down Lindsay's face. "Now, I don't deserve your kindness. This isn't about what you deserve," Jessica said. "It's about what Caleb needs." Lindsay nodded, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "Yes," she whispered. "If they'll allow it, yes, please, take care of my boy." 2 hours later, after a flurry of paperwork and preliminary approvals, Jessica found herself driving home with 2 sleeping children in the backseat of her car. Avery was secured in her car seat, and beside her Caleb dozed with his head against the window, his toy car still clutched in his small hand. As Jessica drove through the quiet streets of Sequim, the weight of the past 3 days pressed upon her. Yet alongside the lingering fear and anger was something new, a sense of purpose, of rightness in her decision to help Caleb. The world was not always kind or fair. People made terrible choices for complex reasons. Justice would be served. Eric and Lindsay would face the consequences of their actions, but mercy could coexist with justice, Jessica believed. And sometimes, from the darkest circumstances, unexpected light could emerge. She glanced in the rearview mirror at the two children, one her daughter by birth, the other now temporarily in her care by choice. Both innocent, both deserving of security and love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be more interviews, legal proceedings, adjustments to their suddenly expanded household. There would be tough conversations and tears and healing to be done. But tonight, driving home under a canopy of stars, Jessica felt a profound gratitude that transcended the horror of what they had endured. Her daughter was safe. A little boy who had lost everything had found a safe harbor, and Jessica herself had discovered a capacity for compassion she hadn't known she possessed.